Hi everyone, welcome back. This is our second installment. The Knoxville Public Library is hosting Melissa Molloy for our voter education series. We're very thrilled that she's able to offer us all of this time and expertise. Melissa is a graduate from Knoxville. Many of you might recognize her. She's a recent graduate from Reed College in Portland, Oregon, where she studied international and comparative policy studies. She'll be heading off relatively soon in the fall of 2021 to law school, and there she hopes to focus on election law or employment law. In the meantime, she's dedicated her time for this. Tonight, our second session is on why your vote matters. The case for voting, even when it feels like a waste of your time. All right. The floor is yours now.
Okay, well, thank you so much for hosting me once again. I'm very excited to do this presentation tonight. This is perhaps one of the things I'm most passionate about. You know, you can tell people random facts about voting history, but when it comes to convincing people why they should vote, like, this is the stuff that I absolutely love ranting about, and now I get to do it for a full hour. So welcome everyone to Why Your Vote Matters, the case for voting, even if it feels like a waste of your time. I really appreciate you being here tonight, virtually or in the future if you're watching this. There are a couple things that I want you to come away with after our class tonight. I want you to feel empowered to vote, first and foremost. If you're currently on the fence about whether or not it's a worthwhile endeavor, this is a presentation for you. And the fact that you're here means that you've already taken an incredible step toward making that happen. But perhaps more importantly, I want you to come away from this ready to encourage other people to vote, and I want you to be excited to do that. In this presentation, I'm going to address why people don't vote and why they should, but also some really effective ways of making sure that people will actually vote, including yourself, and I encourage you to try some of them on the people that you know, so that you can, try and encourage them to show up to the polls without getting into an argument about the nitty-gritty of politics itself. So you can talk about voting without talking about politics if that's something that you're worried about, but like I said, I'll get into that. So just briefly, the structure of the presentations here. It's based around the 6 main reasons that people have for not voting, according to a 2017 Pew Research study. I'll state each one, discuss why people may feel that way, and talk about what you can do to alleviate those concerns. And after that, I'll get into some tools you can take with you for elevating your voice in politics, one of which, one of the most important of which is encouraging other people to vote along with you. At the end, I'll have a little bit of time for questions, so if you have anything to ask along the way, please feel free to send it to the chat, and I'll answer those questions at the end. Okay, so first off, we have this graph here. An estimated 21.4% of eligible voters nationwide are not registered to vote. First off, so the chart here, you can see it's broken up into registered and unregistered non-voters, but I'll describe that in a little bit. But 21.4%, that's about 50 million people. By comparison, the winner of the national popular vote in 2016 for the presidential election was Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton, and she received 65 million votes, and her opponent, Republican candidate Donald Trump, received about 62 million votes. So even if a fraction of those people, of those 50 million people who didn't vote in 2016, had voted, we might have seen a different outcome, and that's like, almost as many votes as either of those candidates received were people who stayed home. So back to this graph here, you'll see that it's the unregistered have different reasons for infrequent voters for not voting, but it's, the percentage of respondents selecting each of these reasons, they can have selected multiple of reasons that they didn't turn out to the polls, whether they were registered or not. So respondents could choose multiple reasons for not voting, which is why they don't all add up to 100%. And, on the left side of that graph there, you can see this is some of the most common reasons people gave for not voting. There are some similarities between the registered non-voters and the unregistered population, but there are also some important differences. So for instance, you can see the number one reason that people who were not registered didn't vote was because they dislike politics. For folks who were registered, the top 2 contenders were disliking the particular candidates and not feeling informed enough about making the right decision. So other reasons for not casting a ballot include thinking that voting has little to do with the way real decisions are made, or that their vote isn't going to affect the results, that they don't see a difference between candidates, or that they aren't interested in what's happening in government. Okay, so I use data from this chart to break up into my 6 reasons or the 6 things that I explained during this presentation about, why you should vote. So every single one of these, there's a reason that you might feel them. There's probably a very understandable reason, but it shouldn't, and I repeat, it should not prevent you from voting. So these are the 6 reasons I explore in order from least common to most common. So starting with I'm too busy to vote, going into I just don't think about it. I'm not informed enough about the candidates or issues to make a good decision. I don't see a difference between the candidates or parties, / I don't like any of these candidates on the ballot. My vote isn't going to affect how things turn out, or voting has little to do with the way real decisions are made. And I dislike politics, or I'm not interested in what is happening in government. First off, I am too busy to vote. So 6% of people who weren't registered to vote and responded to this put that as one of their top reasons for not voting, and 18% of people who were registered to vote but didn't vote selected this as their reason. Okay. And okay, so with this one, I actually kind of agree. Being a voter in the US can be exhausting. We don't just have one election every 4 years or federal elections every 2 years, but elections every year for local and statewide office, as well as special elections and runoff elections and primary elections and caucuses. Americans have more opportunities to vote in just 10 years than Japanese citizens do in their entire lifetime. Here I have just a 3-year election calendar for here in Iowa of all the potential elections. There are at least 2 elections every year, a primary and a general, with the opportunity for a runoff election. And that's a lot of voting. It really is, especially when you have to think about how, in addition to those elections, you have registration deadlines, you have to update your address, there are deadlines for early voting and absentee ballot requests and return deadlines. And on top of that, you have to learn about those candidates that you're voting for and make an educated decision. So we're busy people. It's definitely true that people feel that way. And so, that being said, this book right here, Thank You for Voting, The Maddening, Enlightening, Inspiring Truth About Voting in America by Erin Geiger-Smith was an incredibly important book to me when I was putting together this and all of my presentations. She says in her book, why exactly are we so lazy? To start, I don't think we are. We're stretched for time, we're stretched for childcare, and in some places, limited hours to vote don't accommodate strict work schedules. And even if the majority of us value voting as a right, that doesn't necessarily translate into explaining to younger generations the importance or the mechanics of voting, and that it's a right effective only when put into action. So that's a quote from 2020. And Erin hits on something here that I think is really smart. She acknowledges that, yes, we are very busy, but when it comes to doing something that we think is important, something that we see as valuable and necessary, we find the time. We'll hop on the internet and find out that our state, if you live in Iowa, requires an employer to give an employee up to 3 hours of paid time off to vote if you were unable to utilize earlier absentee voting before Election Day. We'll take an evening scroll through Ballotpedia to learn about the candidates that are going to be on our ballots, or listen to a podcast, or ask that one friend we all have who's a little too interested in politics what they think about what's going on, and we'll make it happen. Because voting is one of those things that's important enough to make time for. One of the contributing factors to why people chose this response, I'm sure, is because they also don't see the value in voting. They think that their vote doesn't matter and they don't care about politics. In a few slides, I am going to talk about why both of these assumptions are wrong, but for right now, I'm going to talk about some of the resources out there that are trying to make it as easy as possible for you to vote. So here you can see just a sampling of the available organizations that are out there trying to help it make it as easy as possible for you to vote. So Vote 411 is a project by the League of Women Voters that was launched in 2006 and aims to be a one-stop shop for election-related information. It can help you check if you're registered to vote, where your polling place is, and what your state's ID requirements are. And it even includes factual information on candidates and ballot measures in some races. That last tool isn't so useful if you don't have a League of Women Voters chapter in your area, but the other things it can help you do. And you can see all of your state's relevant voting laws, policies explained in a readable manner all in one place. Here in Iowa, our Secretary of State's website is also an incredible resource. Not only is it the real official place where you print out your registration form and your absentee ballot request and check your status for your ballot, but it is filled with information for voters specifically. They have a voter ready toolkit, which helps you know exactly what you need in order to be ready to vote, and it's all specific to Iowa. And then next we have Vote Save America. And Vote Save America is a modern kind of website designed to make it more friendly to younger voters, using fun, familiar language that makes learning about voting seem less like a slog and more like learning from a friend. It goes beyond voter information by providing you with information about how to volunteer and donate in your area. And, you know, I would be remiss without talking about some of the laws themselves that make it easier to vote and less time consuming. So automatic voter registration, motor voter laws, no excuse absentee ballots, early in-person voting periods, all things I talked about last week. And all of these laws give you the flexibility to vote when it's most convenient for you. And it makes it as easy as possible to register. And if you like these laws and think that laws like them aimed toward making it easy and safe to vote, remember that the people who passed those laws were elected by people who made time to vote. And there are laws that don't exist yet that could make it easier to vote, like making Election Day a holiday, boosting public funding for election education in schools, or laws that would help your life be less busy and stressful and give you the capacity to worry about voting in the first place. But in order to make those laws happen, we have to make the time now when it's harder to do so. And I believe that a better world is worth fighting for, so we should make that time. So number 5, we have I just don't think about it. 17% of people who were unregistered and responded to this survey indicated that as one of their top reasons for not voting, and 16% of the registered non-voters indicated it as one of their reasons for not voting. So here in the US, we have a culture where we're not supposed to talk about politics in polite conversation. Politics doesn't belong at the dinner table, politics doesn't belong in the workplace, politics doesn't belong in a bunch of other places, until the point where we feel, for many people, politics is something that it feels like you're only allowed to engage with by yourself or in specifically designated political places where everyone else there already agrees with you. And I think that's a problem. Because we live in a society that lets us forget to do one of our most important civic duties, it means that we also forget that the result of doing or not doing that thing is what chooses the people who get to make decisions that influence every single one of our lives every single day. I'll talk more in a bit about why you should care about politics and why you probably already do, even if you don't know it. But for a moment, I'm going to talk specifically about how you can help yourself and your friends, family, and coworkers remember to vote in a way that's not going to ruin your relationships. So one of the best ways, perhaps the best way, to help you remember to vote is to talk about voting and to make a pact with someone you know you're going to be voting, or a pact with someone that you know, so that you can be voting buddies. When you say something out loud, especially to other people, you are more likely to remember it. And when you have another person that you're going to vote with, you can help them remember to vote just like they'll help you. It's the power of social pressure. If you have someone who's going to check in with you and say, hey, did you vote? And if you have to say, no, I didn't do it, that's going to feel kind of bad. So you're more likely to do it just because of that fact of social pressure alone. I want to emphasize, you don't have to talk about who you're going to vote for. You don't have to talk about the substance of politics at all. All you have to do is tell someone you're going to vote and ask them to come with you or check in with each other about whether or not you voted. Make a plan with that person, whether it's meeting at your polling place at a specific time, deciding what day you're going to have your ballot mailed by, or anything like that. That's it. Make a plan with someone and have them hold you accountable. Doing that is not going to lose you a friend or get you shunned from polite society. And in fact, being civically involved actually benefits you socially and emotionally. So there are so many benefits to remembering to vote, and you should do it. If you're not comfortable doing that kind of thing, you can also sign up for text and email reminders from a bunch of different organizations to keep voting on your radar. If you don't want to open up the door to talking about politics with other people. So Democracy Works, which runs TurboVote, helps you remember to vote by not only helping you know if you're registered, but by letting you know when your next election is and walking you through making a plan to vote in person or by mail. they also send you periodic, but not annoyingly frequent, reminders to vote in the next election. It helps keep voting on your radar so that you can no longer have that excuse that you forgot. Okay, so reason number 4, I'm not informed enough about the candidates or the issues to make a good decision. 17% of people who are not registered to vote who responded to this poll chose that as one of their primary reasons, and 39% of registered non-voters who responded to this survey said that that was one of their primary reasons for not voting. So I, once again, think that this reason that people don't vote has some serious merit behind it, especially now when misinformation travels farther and faster than the truth on the internet. It is so hard to wade into politics and feel like you ever get anything out of it. It can get overwhelming, especially as soon as you realize how much you don't know. I even feel this sometimes, and I have dedicated my academic career and a significant chunk of my personal free time to learning about why this country is the way it is, especially with regard to policy, politics, and elections. Luckily, you're here. You're already taking a huge step in getting informed by coming to this section. And next week, I'm going to discuss news literacy and some other really important skills to alleviating your concern of not knowing enough. So, news literacy, briefly, those are the skills that help you know that the things you're reading or listening to are the truth. And then the week after that, I am going to be going over the candidates who will be on your ballot in November if you live here in Knoxville. So I'll be talking about, every single thing that's going to be on your ballot, including stuff that I personally have never researched before. So I'm learning stuff from this just like you are. But in general, there are once again many, many organizations and websites dedicated to helping you learn more about politics and upcoming elections in the most streamlined way possible. There are a number of reputable sources for information about candidates, such as Ballotpedia, or sites dedicated to investigating and fact-checking posts and claims, such as Snopes and PolitiFact, and sites dedicated to telling you which sites routinely display bias or spread misinformation, such as All Sides. I'll talk about all of these resources so much more in detail next week. The News Literacy Project specifically, I attended one of their conferences years and years ago, and it has revolutionized the way that I approach media, and so I use them heavily as a resource for next week's presentation. But I've got them all in the presentation here for you right now, so that how many people are out there. So many people are out there, and their whole careers are dedicated towards making it easier for you to confidently engage with media and to get more informed about politics. Podcasts are really popular right now. So there are a bunch of daily and weekly podcasts and news sources that have a shortened version of things that they think you should know for the day. So The Daily, run by the New York Times, Up First by NPR, and a bunch of other news outlets round up important news stories all in one place. And listening to them takes about 10 minutes out of your day. So that's 10 minutes. You can do that while you're washing your face in the morning, while you're cleaning up after dinner in the evening, even on your drive home from work. They make it incredibly easy for you to make learning about politics part of your routine, and it doesn't take up any more time out of your day than you're already spending doing something else. There are also politically specific podcasts, such as Political Gabfest and Left, Right, and Center that I've shown here. And they have many different voters, but these two that I've shown you here are specifically for introducing and discussing opposing ideas on political issues. So these are explicitly bipartisan / nonpartisan podcasts that discuss the issues from all angles, so that you're not just in an echo chamber of listening to people who already believe what you believe, and you're not getting an incredibly skewed version of what's happening. So you can also set up notifications and emails so that news arrives to you via daily or weekly news briefings, like right to your email inbox, so you don't even have to go seek it out. Adding just a little bit of news consumption to your day can make a huge difference in how involved you feel in the world and your feelings on whether or not you know how to vote. You don't have to spend hours and hours at a time reading deeply academic articles to be an educated voter. It just takes the energy to form a habit and make it part of your routine, and that's something that we can all do. So, reason number 3, I don't see a difference between the candidates or parties, and I don't like any of the candidates on the ballot. So briefly, this is 2 separate responses. but I saw enough overlap between them that I'm going to be discussing them simultaneously. So in this instance, 24% of unregistered respondents said that they didn't see difference between the candidates or parties, and 18% of registered respondents said that, and 37% of unregistered respondents said, I don't like any of the candidates on the ballot, and 31% of registered respondents said that. So this was both of these were pretty popular responses, and I'm going to talk about why people might think that. So, like I said, these are two similar but distinct reasons that people don't vote. The first is that they see no difference between the political parties, and while it is true that both parties, at the federal level at least, are dominated by an elite group of political insiders, and the biggest group of people claiming to be outsiders coming in to drain the swamp are an elite group of ultra-wealthy citizens who really have no idea how most Americans live, there are in fact huge differences between the two parties in terms of what they think is morally correct and what they think needs to be done to positively shape the future of our nation. Opposing viewpoints on major social issues align almost perfectly along the two major party lines. If Democrats support it, Republicans reject it, and vice versa. According to a 2018 article from 538, while major issues are not necessarily more divisive than they have been in the past, the rate at which the divisions match party lines is unheard of. Sure, when you know very little about politics, it can be really easy to believe the rhetoric that all either party is a bunch of rich people arguing over things that are out of touch with most Americans. But as soon as you get past that, you'll realize that the priorities each party has on some issues are fundamentally incompatible, and their methods of addressing problems they do agree on are similarly divergent. So the parties are very different, those two major parties, and then, third parties, fourth parties, all of the other minor parties do also vary widely in their ideological motivations. So I would encourage you to do a little research about, party platforms, the history of parties, so you can learn more about those. But basically, what I don't want you to do is fall prey to the rhetoric that they're both the same. Because falling prey to that, believing that kind of thing, that they're both the same with regard to parties and individual candidates, is very dangerous. And whenever it's peddled to you by a website, by people on the internet, or by any other source, I want you to think critically about why that source wants to keep you from voting. Anything, anywhere, everywhere, ever that tells you not to vote should immediately be seen as suspicious. Remember from last week that 90% of Americans believe that the right to vote is a fundamental right. There is a reason why someone would tell you not to vote, and it's never good for you. It doesn't matter if it's a Twitter thread or an online post and it reads like a hot take from someone who shares your views and is just as illusioned with the system as you are. If it's telling you not to vote, don't trust it. You can participate in the system while also being critical of it and pushing for it to improve. And even if you do know things about politics and you don't generally align with either party and neither of the candidates thrills you, or maybe you're just generally a voter on one side of the aisle and you think your candidate in particular this year stinks, I have a few metaphors for you about why you should vote anyway, and I'll get to those in a minute, but first I am going to highlight something incredibly important here, and that is primary elections. So, primary elections. If you have ever been dissatisfied with the direction a party or candidate is taking, the primary elections are the time to make your vote heard. The ideological spread among primary candidates, especially at the presidential level, is wide. These are where new ideas are introduced and public support for them is gauged. You're also most likely to get access to a candidate, especially here in Iowa during the primaries. At the state and local level, the primary campaigns are a time when you can almost certainly have direct contact with the candidate to voice your concerns and see what they think about the things that are important to you. Aside from a huge surge in primary participation this year, you remember we were at like 40-some%. Participation rates for primaries in Iowa have hovered around 16%. That's 16%. And those are the people who get to choose who everyone else does or doesn't vote for. That's a huge amount of power, and that's, I think one of the unsung heroes of politics is that you get to influence who gets to run in your party. And even if your candidate doesn't win the primary, there is a good chance that if they got substantial support in the primary, that they will influence the candidate who does win because they want your support. So vote in the primary election is what I'm saying here. Okay, so now, 2 metaphors. The first one here you'll see, okay, but first, to be perfectly transparent, I found these on the internet as tweets or other social media posts during my personal browsing over the last few years. So, they're not like widely spread theories about voting, but they did help me personally clarify why I think it's important to vote. So I am sharing them with you. So this first one, I'll read it to you. So, time to remember the best voting advice I ever heard, says Steady Moon. Voting isn't marriage, it's public transport. You're not waiting for the one who's absolutely perfect. You're getting on the bus, and if there isn't one to your destination, you don't not travel. You take the one that's going the closest. So what this is saying is vote anyway if you don't like the candidates, because one of them will be more likely to sympathize with your beliefs, and you and others like you can push them in the direction that you want. And remember also that particular candidate that you don't like very much, they appoint, depending on the office, obviously, they appoint other people who last a lot longer than they do. So specifically right now, I'm thinking that there is an empty Supreme Court seat, and whoever fills that is probably going to be on the Supreme Court for decades. Someone's president for a maximum of 8 years. So staying home gets you nowhere, literally. You're staying home, you're not getting on the bus, you're not getting close to where you want to go. See, it's a metaphor, it's great. You should vote, is what I'm saying about that. And so the second one, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but what it basically says, it hits on a very important idea with regard to voting. If you don't vote, a winner is still decided, you just had no part in it. You are still subject to every single law they pass, but you didn't put that person in office. There is no magic, I didn't vote, so I'm free from the things my elected officials do, because that's not how it works. You have the right and the opportunity to vote. So if you don't take it, you have no right to complain about the consequences. I mean, obviously you do, but only if your complaining means calling your representatives and making sure they know that you're not representing your constituents. So anyway, you should vote. You have a responsibility to vote. And if you're not satisfied with how things go, you have a responsibility to get involved further. But anyway, moving on. So reason number 2 is, once again, 2 different reasons. My one vote isn't going to affect how things turn out, and voting has little to do with the way real decisions are made. So 30% of unregistered respondents chose that first one, and 18% of registered respondents said that, and 35% and 19% respectively of unregistered and registered respondents said that voting has little to do with the way real decisions are made. Okay. So, we've probably all heard this. My vote doesn't matter. We've probably all been told this. Your vote doesn't matter. And we've probably all seen this very comic before, especially in presidential elections. And if you're in a safe red or blue state and you are an opposing party, extra especially, it can feel very seriously like your one vote is a drop in an ocean, and that if you don't contribute your one little vote, it won't matter. And when you think about it like that, yeah, your one specific vote won't impact the outcome of an election. I won't lie to you about that. But the reason you should vote is not for your own personal gain or success. It's about democracy. In an election where only a small proportion of voters actually vote, the outcome does not actually represent the people, just those particular ones. So don't think about your vote as an individual decision. Think of yourself as part of a whole. If you don't vote, the other people like you, or then other people like you won't vote either, because they have the same line of thinking. And eventually so many people have dropped out of the electorate that it does impact the outcome of an election. But on the reverse, if you do vote and other people who are ideologically similar to you vote because they have that same line of thinking, you create a culture of voting, and then your collective voice will matter. Right now, about half of eligible voters vote in presidential elections, and even fewer when president is not on the ballot. And less than 50% of people choose the people who make the laws and policies that affect all of our lives. And once again, if you don't vote, it does not exempt you from the consequences of who is elected. And maybe in the presidential race, your specific vote doesn't matter, but there are 8 partisan races on your ballot on this November, 2 nonpartisan races, 14 judge retentions, and 1 public measure all the way down to the county level. Our local races are not competitive here in Marion County, sure, because we do live in a majority Republican county, but in the primaries, each party has the opportunity to shape our elected officials and what our local party looks like. And the underdog party may want to give up, but that just gives even more power to the party in power. It is the job of the minority party to hold the majority accountable and to shore up support to perhaps make the district competitive again over time. Uphill battles have been won in the past, and they will be won in the future as well. And maybe you feel like your vote doesn't matter because it doesn't affect how policy is created anyway. Once again, well, sure, your specific vote might not be the direct cause of fixing everything wrong in the world, but you should vote anyway. And if you feel passionate about something, if there's something that really matters to you and you feel like casting your ballot isn't enough to make the kinds of changes happen that you want to see, then get involved outside of one Tuesday in November and make your voice heard. Volunteer at a local nonprofit, join a community of like-minded individuals, call your representatives so that they know that an issue is important to their constituents. Anyone who is elected into office has a responsibility to serve you whether or not you voted for them. You can hate your elected official with all your guts, but that doesn't mean you should stay home and pout about it. Get out there and do something to make it your world better so that one day you'll have an elected official that you actually like. And maybe that person could be you. Opportunity abounds to get involved in government and make positive change, so staying home doesn't fix it. Okay, so I'm not gonna lie to you and say that casting your vote on election day is going to change the course of history or give you statistics about close races decided by just one vote. Because voting is and should not be the bare minimum, or because voting is and should be just the bare minimum of what you should be doing with respect to civic involvement. Even if the people you voted, or even the people that you voted for can do things that you don't like and things that are bad, and they can lie. So it's your responsibility to hold them accountable. So yes, you should vote, but you shouldn't just vote. I know that you're busy. I know that sometimes it's exhausting and it feels like things will never get better or we're moving in the wrong direction. But giving up empowers the people you don't like to do even more things that you like even less, okay? Giving up is like the worst thing you could do if you don't feel like your voice matters. What you should do instead is speak louder. And finally, we have reason number one. I dislike politics, or I'm not interested in what is happening in government. So 40% of people who weren't registered to vote who responded to this survey said that that was why they didn't vote. 20% of people who were registered and responded said that they didn't vote because they don't like politics. And then 18 and 20% respectively said that they didn't vote because they are not interested in what is happening in government. Okay. So I don't like politics. If you have ever had an opinion on road construction in town, if you have ever felt like the school system doesn't have enough money or it spends its money unfairly, if you have ever done your taxes and thought this is way too complicated, or thought that there was something wrong with the idea that you personally paid more taxes than multi-billion-dollar corporations in their entirety, if you have ever had an opinion about basically anything ever in our society, then congratulations, you already care about politics. Our lives are shaped and surrounded by politics in ways so complete that we don't even think about them. The reason that parts of town are only for homes and parts of town are only for businesses is because of politics. The reason that most of the rural Midwest is white and minority populations across the country are concentrated into segregated parts of cities is because of politics. The reason your healthcare is provided by your employer is because of politics. The reason school funding is allocated based on property taxes and not per student need is because of politics. The reason your rent or mortgage costs what it does, and your wage is what it is, and you're still paying off your student loans, or you never had the money to go to college in the first place, is because of politics. I cannot stress enough how important it is for you to realize that politics affects you every single day, whether or not you participate. Politics from 100 years ago is still affecting you, and you weren't even alive then to vote on it. And the politics that you do or do not participate in now will affect your children and your children's children and the children of everyone you care about for generations to come. We all have a responsibility to do the bare minimum and participate in our democracy, because if we don't, then it is more susceptible to corruption and collapse. It's time to start caring about politics. When Melissa, you say, I hate politics. It's just a bunch of infighting between corrupt politicians who only lie to us anyway. Great. I hate politics too. Politics makes me so angry so often, and I hate so many of the things I learn about politics with every fiber of my being. But am I withholding my vote in protest? No, because that's the worst thing you could do. Every person who could vote and doesn't vote allows those corrupt, lying politicians to keep being corrupt and keep lying, and they get to stay in office and keep doing things that you don't like. When you don't vote, you make everything you hate about politics worse. Your vote could help elect people who are nice and honest and who really actually listen to and care about their constituents. But if you stay home, that doesn't happen. The second worst thing you could do is think that voting alone is going to fix things that you hate about politics, because unfortunately, it won't. If you want to make things better, you have to go that extra step. So if you hate politics, get on the phone and tell your elected representative how much you hate politics and what they specifically need to do to make your life better, because that is the whole point of government anyway. Join an organization that aligns with your beliefs and participate in local advocacy to make your community a better place. Okay? Hate politics. I'm serious, hate politics, but get involved and make politics something that you hate less. So that's essentially my spiel on the 6 major reasons for why people don't vote. As you can see, I care a whole lot about this, and I would love to rant to you more about it, but that was actually me reining in my opinions on things. So I do want to talk just a little bit about things that you can do in order to amplify your vote. Because, you know, like I said, your one vote is probably not going to decide an election and change the course of history. Okay, so after all that, you are thinking, okay, I'm gonna vote. I'm gonna push you one step further. I'm going to ask you to ask a friend or a family member or a coworker or as many people as you can think of to vote. You can tell them outright that I don't want to know who you're voting for and I don't want to talk about politics with you. But getting other people to vote is not political. It is part of being a good citizen, and it's part of loving your country and wanting to see it be the best version of itself that it can be. I want you to ask those people in your life to vote, and I want you to be vocal about it when you do vote. Post a selfie on election day of you wearing your I voted sticker. Talk about it on social media. You know, anything like that. Be loud about it and be proud about it. Because when you do that, you help others remember to vote, which you may remember is a big reason why some people don't vote. When you talk about voting around children, also, it helps them learn that voting is an important civic duty. You may remember from last week also that, you know, youth people between like 18 and 30 are the people who have the lowest voter participation rates. And then once you get up later into life, it's when the highest percentage of the populace votes, even though they're the ones who are going to be least affected by policy because they've already lived most of their life. And the policies that are passed immediately are the ones that are going to be affecting youth for years and years and years to come. So get kids involved. You can bring your kid with you to the polling place, and you can have them there while you're filling out your ballot. You can talk to them about voting and why it's important. And if you're not going to vote in person, you can have them there while you fill out your absentee ballot. Get young people involved, because the world we're creating right now is the one that's for them. You can also get involved with your time or your money to support an issue or a candidate that's important to you. Once again, I cannot stress it enough. It's important to get involved outside voting. Voting is really the bare minimum you should be doing if you care about your community or your family or the rest of the world at all, because we're part of a community and part of society, and we benefit from it, and we should put back, you know, what we can into it as well. It doesn't have to be a lot. I'm not saying you need to quit your job and start a nonprofit, but you know, you might find that once you do start voting, you're more interested in politics, and even if it makes you hate politics even more, you might want to get involved. Even just once or twice a month, it can really make a big difference. And it doesn't have to be, you know, millions and millions of dollars, like once again we saw last week. Especially in local races, it can make a huge difference. There are so many things that you can do to amplify the importance of your vote that stems from getting others to vote too. When you ask other people to vote, suddenly your vote becomes one vote, your one vote becomes 2 votes or 6, and they get other people to vote if you tell them they should also get other people to vote, and then suddenly that number expands and multiplies, all because you took the initiative to say, hey, I'm going to vote. So with that being said, I'm going to vote, and you should too. Okay. And is the end of my presentation. Heather, do we have any questions?
One moment. I'm not seeing any in the chat. Perhaps they're like me, right? When I listen to these things, I like to take notes and I make note of all of my questions. And I had several, but each time you would just immediately get to the answer. So I'd check it off, check it off. So really, you covered a lot of excellent ground there. And I hope everyone else is inspired. I especially appreciate the list of the useful sources to find out you know, what elections are coming up, how I can learn more about the candidates. Those are useful. I wrote those down. We'll do our part here at the library to try to get those posted and shared. Let me check. Anyone? I think we're good. So you must have just ticked everybody else's boxes too. Okay, so next week we are having a program on news literacy and responsible voting, skills for confident media engagement. So definitely an important one. Anything else on your end?
No, not really. I mean, I'd be happy to talk a little bit more about things you can do specifically to get the youth involved, and they include, like, you know, voter registration drive. Iowa has something called the Youth Straw Poll that you can participate in. Usually it's at the Iowa State Fair, I believe, but obviously this year that didn't happen. But yeah, getting out the youth vote, especially since I think millennials for the first time are, like, you know, they have the biggest share of the electorate, but still have one of the smallest generational voting rates. So anyway, yeah, Gen Z are the folks that are in high school and college right now.
Right.
But yeah, so like getting the youth to vote is important, and I'm happy to talk more about that with anyone who's interested.
What would you say to those who are in high school, maybe not yet able to vote, but are starting to be interested? Is there any point in them thinking about this, getting involved? And also, I guess along the same lines, what about college students who are able to vote? And I don't know the numbers offhand, but I'm assuming the numbers aren't perhaps where we would like them to be. Anything that you would suggest on that end?
Yeah, definitely. So a great thing is, even if you're not old enough to vote, you're old enough to volunteer and you're old enough to learn about politics. So I personally and members of my family have been volunteering, you know, for candidates since like the age of 11 was the first time that I phone banked for a candidate. You know, you can get out and canvass when you're old enough to walk around alone or, you know, with your team. And your support is always appreciated. And if you can establish, you know, routines of, you know, media consumption and news consumptions and being an educated voter, that will benefit you your whole life. If you start voting right away, that's one of the best indicators for if you're going to vote in the future. Starting people young is super, super important because, like I mentioned also, the policies that are happening now are going to affect us all for years and years to come. And if we're all late to the party by realizing, you know, by the time, you know, people my age who are 50 and they're like, oh yeah, in 2020 we had this huge pandemic and it like wrecked a bunch of things and it, you know, didn't have to go the way that it did. I sure wish I'd done something at that point. It's a little too late, too little too late at that point. So emphasizing to the youth, even if they're not old enough to vote yet, that they can still make a difference and they can still start making good habits among themselves and their friends, you know, for voting and being a responsible citizen. And similarly with college students, it can be really easy to forget to vote when you're in college because you are really excited about things like going to parties or being stressed about school and sports and everything like that. And especially if you go to college out of state, it can be hard to feel in touch both with your home community and your transplant community. So I agree, voting rates among college students are not where we would like them to be. You know, people with a college education are on average more likely to vote than people who didn't have the opportunity to go to college. And part of that comes with greater education increases voter participation. And I think that, you know, from within government, we should be working on implementing voter education programs for the students, you know, nonpartisan. Here's how you get information. Here's why it's important to vote. Here's why it's important to get involved outside voting in your community so that we can help shore up community support so that, you know, we can all make a better place for everyone to live. So I don't know if that really answered your question, but yes.
It did help a lot. I think we may have had a little technical difficulty, and chat may have been muted. I think it's now enabled, so if anybody does have a question, and while they're gathering their thoughts and typing, I did actually have a student about college students, or a question about college students. So they might be confused about where they are supposed to vote or how they're supposed to register. So let's say somebody from Knoxville is at the University of Iowa. Are they supposed to register Marion County or Johnson County? Does that make a difference?
Yes, so that is something that I particularly have not done very much research on. So in Iowa specifically, if you are a resident of the state, then you vote in the area of your residence. So, you know, I was in college out of state for 4 years, but I still voted here in Iowa because that's the place that I declared as my permanent residence, and my, you know, my permanent address was here in Iowa. However, you can also declare your permanent / your majority time residence as the place that you are in school. So for instance, if I had gone to Florida and wanted to vote there because it's a battleground state, and you know, I spent, you know, enough time there that I met the residency requirements for that state, I could have registered to vote in that state. And I'm sure that some states have different laws regarding whether or not you need to, for instance, get your driver's license, you know, from that state, or like, you know, do other things to meet their specific state voting requirements. But anyone who has questions about that based on their particular state, I would suggest visiting the website of the Secretary of State for your state, or, you know, the voting resources that I mentioned, because like I said, they're trying to make it as easy as possible for you to vote and know how to vote and know where to vote. So I'm sure that there are resources out there dedicated specifically to college students who are away from their hometown with regard to how and where they should vote.
And I think if I remember from wandering around various college campuses, there's usually a pretty strong private presence of volunteers. So maybe we just say, please don't ignore them or walk by them too quickly, because there is a large presence of people trying to get college students engaged, and they have your best interests in mind. So.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, I think we have another question from chat. Someone wants to know if they're able to get on a non-mailing list to stop political mailings, especially if they're coming from candidates that they do not support. That can sometimes people can be overwhelmed with essentially spam messages, right? Especially from candidates that they are not interested in supporting, and that can kind of turn them off from political engagement at all. So.
Yes, I definitely feel that. I get a lot of text messages, even from candidates I support, and it can get really overwhelming. So unfortunately, your voter registration status and the party that you're registered with, and your voting history, though not who you vote for, is public information. You know, anyone has access to that information, and you know, specifically political parties, you know, have privileged access to that information so that they can help reach out to voters. And it can be really hard to get yourself removed from lists. The best way to get specific groups to stop contacting you is to actually respond to them, because if you ignore a text message or you don't pick up a phone call, then they will keep calling you and keep texting you because they don't have a confirmed response. So there's a chance that they just didn't reach you, they just missed you. So what you should do is, if it's on the phone and you really don't want to get contacted by them, please nicely say, I appreciate your call, but I don't wish to be contacted. Please take me off your list. And usually they will do that for you. If you're mean to someone, or if you just hang up without them getting confirmation from you that you would like to be removed, they might leave you on the list. That's just policy, because you know, every once in a while there is someone who actually really did lose service and they did want to talk, or people who really did just, you know, have their phones off and miss calls a bunch, and you know, anything like that. So responding in a polite way, asking to be removed from that specific list will reduce the amount of communications that you get, because that specific organization won't be reaching out to you anymore. And I know that it's time consuming, and there should be a way that says, I don't want to be contacted about politics, but that is not the way it is. but you can alleviate it by requesting to be removed. So ignoring it doesn't help. And I want to stress that.
Okay, sounds good. Anybody else? I see some excellent compliments about you doing a great job, doing your research very thoroughly. Definitely true. Okay, that's it. All right. So next week we'll learn more about how to do our research, how to be informed voters, where to go, who to trust, what sites to trust, all of that. So very important with regards to the upcoming elections, but also just useful in general about how to sort through information. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. The video of this will be posted soon on our website, so feel free to go back and review the videos again, share with your friends. We appreciate your attention. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.